In today's video, I'm going to be discussing temporal lobe seizures. When most people think of seizures, they think of people like falling to the ground and having convulsions. That is a very common type of seizure, but the one I'm going to be discussing today is temporal lobe seizures, which are less obvious to people who are witnessing it. Now, a big reason I'm going to be talking about that is because I actually have experience with these types of seizures, and when I was younger, I was completely unable to describe to people what I was feeling. Like, my mom was able to tell that like something was going on when I was having the seizure. Like, at first, I'd tell her, I'd just say I was having this really weird feeling in my head, and she'd keep track of every time I reported it to her, and eventually she'd notice that like something was off while I was having it. So to people who haven't officially been diagnosed, fortunately I actually had a seizure while they were doing an EEG on me. It was good timing, and they were able to diagnose me with it. But to people who haven't been diagnosed, who may want a better idea, who may want to get checked out, who think they may possibly be having a seizure. Basically, if I were to describe the feeling now that I have so much experience with it and I'm older, I feel like I can describe it a little better. It's still extremely hard to describe, but I'll try my best. So basically, you'll be doing something, I don't know, you'll be on your computer, you'll be watching TV, heck, you'll even be driving behind the wheel of a car, and just in a flash, like, it's almost like you're conscious, you don't lose consciousness, but your consciousness is altered. Like, you're still aware of where you are, but you can't, comprehend the facts of, like, for me personally, I can't comprehend the facts of, like, what's real. Like, I can't comprehend what's real. Like, for example, during one of my seizures, I was, like, in shock that my brother was away at college. Like, what? My brother goes to college? Like, when did this happen? And I remember one time I was at work and I had a seizure, and I almost forgot that my papa died. Like, he had been dead for a couple months, and for that brief period of like 15 seconds, 20 seconds, I almost kind of forgot that he died. I was like, wait a minute, Papa died? Did he die? And I was like scratching my head. Like, things that you know for sure when you don't have the seizure, you're questioning or aren't sure about when you have the seizure. It's almost like the news is fresh out the box when you're having the seizure. Like, it's not something you kept in your head for months. It's like, it almost feels like it's something you're just realizing. And despite like losing awareness of like things that are going on, like, it hasn't seemed to affect me. Like, even though I'm like losing awareness, for whatever reason, I'm still able to, like, my motor skills aren't impaired. So like, there's been 2 or 3 times I've had a seizure behind the wheel of a car. I was fine. Like, I knew I was on the road. I knew I was driving. I could see fine. So, fortunately, this may not be the case for everyone, but fortunately for me, it hasn't really affected my driving ability, or riding a bike. But it varies in level of severity too. Like sometimes I'll just shake it off like it's barely anything, and other times I'll just be like, oh God, I gotta go lie down in bed right now, and then fall into a deep sleep. So yeah, it really varies in severity too. And the first seizure I ever remember getting, what's funny is the first seizure I remember having, I know wasn't the first seizure I had, because I remember thinking to myself shortly after I had that seizure that I was familiar with the sensation. I remember the day that I had the first seizure that I can remember, that it wasn't the first seizure I've ever had, if that makes any sense. So, and that was when I was 9 years old. I was in class and I had a seizure. That's the first one I remember, like where I was and what I was doing, but I know it wasn't the first one I ever had. So I was 9 at the very oldest when I started having seizures. I could have been having them since I was like a toddler and just don't remember. Or even a baby. So, yeah, if you feel like, and sometimes depending on the severity of the seizure too, like sometimes, like I said, sometimes it'll barely feel like anything, like one tiny little buzz, and then other times it'll be like a full out loss of awareness, totally out into space feeling. Those are the ones that give me like pretty significant headaches, and those are the ones that make me just want to lay in bed and fall asleep. And it'll make me very drowsy for a couple hours afterwards if it's a exceptionally bad one. Yeah, so that's really the best way I can describe it. When I was younger, I just couldn't describe it. The doctors would get frustrated with me because I couldn't describe it, and I just said to them like it's this indescribable feeling, and yeah. And what's funny is some people, like, I know a lot of people. Some people like my family, except for my mom, every now and then. Like my dad and my brother, I've been looking at them face to face while having a seizure. They could never tell that I was having a seizure. Then, with my girlfriend at the time, I'm not dating her anymore, but Mora, who was my. Oh, wait a minute, never mind. We had broken up at that point. But anyways, I was hanging out with Mora, and we were walking around CVS, and I wasn't even looking her in the face, and she could tell that something was really off with me. She kept saying, Kyle, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's the matter with you? And I kept saying nothing. I was denying it because I just didn't want her to worry. And she said, no, Kyle, I know something's wrong with you. And then my friend Ryan, too, like he was easily able to tell that something was off, that something was wrong with me. I had a seizure when I was with him twice. One time when we were walking on the cranberry bogs behind his house, and then another time when we were at the beach. So yeah, that's funny that like some people can tell when I'm having them and some people can't. It's funny that my family, who knows me really well, that I'm around every day, can't tell, and then these people that rarely witness me having a seizure were able to tell. Maybe my family just, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're just used to it, I don't know. Or maybe they just don't, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, so if that feeling sounds familiar to you, I'd say get checked out by a neurologist, maybe get some EEGs. I got like 3 different EEGs. 2 of them were just, one of them was at Falmouth Hospital, one of them was at Children's Hospital, and then one of them, they like put a bunch of needles into my head and sent me home for 24 hours. And I remember the first couple hours I had those needles in my head. Worst frickin' headache of my life. I was like crying, like begging for my mom to turn the car around and have them take it out. And we were thinking about it, but then eventually the pain subsided. So I went through it for 24 hours. It was the one at Children's Hospital where I fortunately had a seizure while they were doing the EEG. And I was diagnosed in December 2010. And yeah, now I currently take Triliptal, and it hasn't cured the seizures. I still get seizures, but I'm not getting it as frequently as I was before I started taking it. I remember before I started taking it, it like every year it kept getting worse and worse and worse, like in terms of like frequency. And then when I started taking it, it started going downhill a little bit, but I still get it every now and then. It's still an occasional thing. So yeah, that's pretty much my whole story of what temporal lobe seizures are like. Um, so if what I described seems very familiar with whatever issue you're experiencing, I'd say get checked out by a neurologist and get some EEGs. And I hope my story is helpful for anyone that can't really describe what they're feeling. And that's it. Goodbye.